There we
It's
go.
was very excited.
Now we're actually live. Welcome everybody. Actually, some people, thank you for waiting. Kelly and I were just talking about things that Kelly is actually growing in the community greenhouse. But welcome everybody to Brain Tech Support Live. This is a special edition with Kelly Renee joining us. I know many viewers have watched the interview I did with Kelly. Actually, can't remember how many years ago we did that. Maybe 2 or 3 years ago.
A few COVID time or
Yeah,
somewhere in
was
there.
it and in that era? So yeah, in a different era,
Yeah.
a kind of post-apocalyptic era we were in back then, which is great to talk about because we're always thinking about disasters and the end of the world. And I thought it would be great uh, to because we're always doing Brain Tech Support Live where we're talking about different like challenges and cutting out this compulsion and that compulsion, things like that. But what if we did a session that was just about what's it like beyond that? What if we're not constantly like chasing after recovery, but having the conversation about recovery as a beginning?
Yeah.
This this kind of conversation also started out from a presentation that we were discussing. And we had talked about doing a presentation at the IOCDF conference. I decided I wasn't going to be traveling to the US this year. And so I figured we could bring it online. But there were you brought up so many insights, Kelly, in our notes when we were planning that presentation that I thought were amazing, and I didn't want to lose them. So I thought if we could start, there is a short little paragraph here that you wrote, and I thought it was a great way to capture what we wanted to explore. So maybe to start things off, I'll read out uh, this quote from you, and we'll dive into things. Uh, you wrote this. You said, "You and I have talked before about not always feeling called to keep coming back to the struggle, when what is vitally more important is the building. And fittingly, so much of walking away from OCD involves creating something to walk towards. So maybe the session is more pared down from the bullets I shared above. Maybe it's as simple as a conversation about recovery as a beginning, about building a life grounded in values, and how that is so vital to leaving OCD behind, about how recovery is not an end point, but a gateway to the most meaningful life you could ever imagine. It's a door that you get to walk through. And what's on the other side isn't the life you had before. It's not normal, but rather it's whatever you've decided is worth building and giving and living for." I really love that description of recovery as a beginning.
Thank you.
Yeah, Kelly, what are your thoughts on that now? I guess we were exploring that a couple months ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, what do you think about that now?
Yeah. I mean, I think that really sums up the way that I see recovery. And we have this sort of pared down definition of recovery that you and I think kind of share, which is right. Like it's the practice of getting to be myself and building a life that I find meaningful while having any internal or external experience, right? That's kind of the
Yeah.
more pared down, I think, uh, definition of recovery. But it's so much more than that. Like it's so much
Mm.
more fun than that. That's the simple version, right?
That is a good
The
point. Yeah.
the fun, awesome version is like you get to do whatever you want. Like there's so much out there that you can explore and build and engage with and grow and my life I used to feel like, oh, if I can just fix OCD,
Mm.
then I'll be able to do whatever. And it wasn't until, I think from you, I probably learned that it was the doing whatever that was going to help me walk away from OCD. I had to have something to walk towards. And in my recovery journey, that ended up, I think, being the pivotal point. That unless you are building something to go to, unless you have an idea of where you want to be and what you want to be doing and how you want to be spending your time, you very likely will struggle because the brain needs somewhere to go. The
Yeah.
brain needs something to put its energy towards. So yeah, I think it's a misconception that recovery is like a piece of paper you get, a test you pass, a level of enlightenment you
Yeah.
ascend to, and then your life is after that. And
Yeah.
it's not that. Recovery is a lot more akin to, like, yeah, a door you walk through, or even the path itself, right? I'm always on this recovery path. And there have been times that I'm sure we'll get into when I have woken up and been kind of on a side margin and been like, what the heck? How am I over here? And you kind of have to get yourself back onto the
Mhm.
recovery path. I think most people see it as too finite, um, or too much of a destination. And it's a lot more broad than that.
There are so many, yeah, it's so many elements of what you just mentioned that we'll probably come back to again. Because even I shared a question box on Instagram, and some of the members sent in questions. But I think a lot of them come back to what you just described there. Like, we're so often thinking of recovery, especially when we're struggling, like it's going to be this place where we now have permission to go and live our lives. So kind of, yeah, like we're in that wilderness and like waiting for some park ranger to come and tell us that, oh, it's okay to go down that path. And we're just sitting there and be like, I don't know if there are bears, or I don't know if I'm going to have a panic attack if I go down that path. I don't know what's down there. And we're just kind of waiting. And so we're looking for these other things to get
Yeah.
resolved. Like, once I have all of these fears checked off, then I will have permission to walk down the path. But actually, yeah, recovery is in many ways the practice of walking down the path.
Yes. Yeah.
The practice is the way out. But I think too, like I mentioned, that I think, and I'll see this a lot. We'll bring up that, no, like we're gonna go do the things, and oh, but if the thoughts are there or something like that, then that's gonna suck. And so I think it is important to mention that it's really fun. That actually going to do the things you want to do, while having any thought or feeling, actually is amazing, and we'll probably get into that too. Yeah, like being able to do the things I can do now without having to struggle with the experiences I had back when I struggled with OCD is so much more enjoyable.
Yeah. Yeah. And Mark, do you feel like when I struggled, if I look back at like the me I am today and who I kind of understand myself to be and the things I value and the things I love and the things I find important,
Mhm.
if I take from that person and look back at the me I was with OCD, it's like I was kind of living a half life. I didn't even really know who I was. I didn't know what I liked. I didn't know it, for many respects, what made me tick. And being able to walk that path and discovery, like, that's been huge too.
Mhm.
It's the discovery itself of, like, not only getting to do those things, but just kind of learning who I am when I'm not caught up in this, space in my head, and learning that I am this whole person, that it's like I got to meet myself.
Can you tell me more about that? Because I think I always think of it like that too. Like, I'll sometimes draw an illustration of like two people, and like one running in that direction is us doing the compulsions, and then there's this other self, like, that wants to go towards these things we want to explore and learn, but maybe we never let ourselves because we're like, I've got to fix all these fears right now. How did you start to explore being you?
Yeah, I think the first, thing that sort of shocked me was and I've talked about this a lot on my channel too, but letting go of the story I was telling myself, because I was
Mhm.
telling myself a very strong story about who I was. I had very strong beliefs about the kind of person I was, and even just like my personality type, I would have told you back then, like, oh, I'm type A, like I'm very
Yeah.
type A. I would have told you that. Spoiler alert. I'm not at all. I just had a lot of controlling compulsions that made me look very type A. And I had these, yeah, really deep seated beliefs about who I was as a person. And when I started to kind of let that go and
Mm.
be open to, well, what do I really like? And then I think there was this element of bravery too, because there are people in my life who had known me for a very long time that I had to kind of trust, like, are you gonna like me
Oh,
when you
yeah.
meet me, the real me, when I figure out who that is? I am married. I was married during that period. Thankfully, he still likes me. Um, Today is actually our 13th wedding
Oh
anniversary,
no! Congratulations! Happy wedding
so that
anniversary.
yes, thank you. We're gonna celebrate later, but that was a huge thing. It was like, I'm a totally different, not maybe a totally different person, but I am in many respects different. And so letting go of the story and
Mhm.
then having some bravery around trusting that, that the people that needed to stay in my life, or should stay in my life, would stay in my life. And I think also just kind of trusting that whoever I was going to end up being wasn't like bad, or scary, right? Like, it's okay, Kelly. Like, you don't have to prove anything to anybody. Like, you're probably going to be pretty all right, you know?
I'm glad you introduced that. Somebody was getting a lot of reassurance from this, but now they're like, "Oh, okay, I still could turn into an assassin when I recover."
I probably, yeah, sorry, man,
Mhm.
but yeah, there was an element of fear around, like, well, am
Yeah.
I gonna like me? And the truth is I think when you start to self actualize, yes, of course you do feel comfortable in your skin, and you do,
Mhm.
and that's really what it was, is kind of this practice of self-actualization. Um, and then I still have moments where I feel like I'm introducing myself. Like, I might handle
Yeah.
something, a situation might come up, and I may handle it differently than old Kelly would have. And my husband will sort of maybe react as though like old Kelly was gonna do that. And I will have to say, just as a reminder, new Kelly doesn't have near as many controlling compulsions. New Kelly does not really care how this situation gets played out. Um, Happy to be a co-captain here instead of the head honcho. And I feel like I'm still years later kind of reintroducing myself to people, and in situations where I maybe don't act the way that people might have expected me to act based on who I was before.
I I love how you explain that, because that's also, there's something really deep and fascinating about how we are going on this journey of being ourselves, but on the way we'll have to recognize that all of these stories we have about ourselves may not actually be ourselves. Like, that's something,
Yeah.
and we'll get into this, but a bunch of people submitted questions, but that's something I'll still be aware of in the practice now. Just if something new comes up, if I'm like, oh, that idea won't work or something like that, is that actually that I don't want to do that, or is that, oh, I think there's some uncertainty there, or there's some kind of fear there, and I just automatically said, like, oh, I don't like that. And actually, it's not that I don't like that, it's that my brain just automatically went, oh, there's a potential uncertainty there, quick,
Yeah.
let's get rid of it, let's
Yeah.
remove it. And so being open to say, like, often now say, oh, okay, actually I noticed that I rejected that automatically, but maybe I would enjoy that. This story that, there's some kind of problem or uncertainty or fear there isn't that useful to me anymore.
Yeah. And being able to slow down and have that, awareness, that sort of like separation of thinker and thought, right? Where you're able to
Mhm.
kind of observe those things happening. That's key to that process too, right? Of like being able to observe oneself, and
Mhm.
then get curious about, well, why am I doing that? Like, why am I having that reaction, or making that decision? Is that is that just because it's what I've always done, or is that aligned with the way I want to move forward? A lot of my uh, OCD, struggle kind of came out of, excuse me, a childhood where I had to be in charge a lot more than a child should have to be in charge. And I don't think that understanding is key to recovery, right? I don't think
Mm,
understanding why you have OCD is key to recovery. I don't think it's important or necessary whatsoever. But having that being able to have that understanding has given me some perspective on some of those reactions I might have, right? In a situation where something will happen and I will maybe have this gut check feeling that like, well, if I don't do it, nobody will.
mhm.
And that's a pattern for me that I know comes from, being little, and nobody would if I wasn't gonna. So now I have to when situations like that come up, I will like stop and ask myself, am I taking responsibility for this because it's my responsibility? Or am I taking responsibility for this because I'm not willing to give trust to other people, whose maybe responsibility it is more aligned with? And yeah, having that, being able to take that observational layer,
Mhm.
I think is a big part of discovering that about yourself.
And that trust in yourself, like that's something I'll do a lot there. I'll notice that uncertainty around controlling something, or like, I'll kind of feel that urge, like, oh, like we should control that, and then doing that. Okay, well, that's not actually my responsibility. I can see myself stepping in here, and then the brain, quickly comes back with, well, like this is going to go wrong for this reason and that reason and this reason. I go, yeah, then that'll happen, and we'll like I'll handle that, and I'll support that person, and yeah, you're right, Brett. That could happen, and we'll have that experience. Like we can be curious about that experience.
Exactly.
How I think this will come up a lot today in a kind of support layer, uh, which is curiosity.
Yeah.
Because just thinking about some of the questions that people sent in, a lot of it will be that willingness to like and notice that, oh, I've got to control this, and even thinking I'm good at controlling it. If I don't do it, nobody else is going to do it. Have you found anything that helps you explore curiosity, or that willingness to say, hey, yeah, we're going to go try something here? The brain's going to, well, the world is going to end then, and we're like, all right, well, I trust myself to explore the end of the world.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think a great sense of humor helps,
Mm,
right? Like
it's true.
you, you said something one time, and it has stuck with me for so long, for years now. This concept of holding things lightly, and I
Mhm.
think we can apply this concept anywhere, but I really like to apply it to trying new things and to curiosity, because the when I hold failure lightly, or if I
Mhm.
hold success lightly, if I hold this idea that I need to have a certain outcome very lightly, uh, I'm a lot more inclined to try things. I'm a lot more
Yeah.
inclined to be curious, because now there's no expectation to have the best outcome ever, and to win at everything. My garden is a great example of me holding success lightly. um, I am a chaos gardener through
Yeah.
and through. There is a plan, but it's vague, and by the end of April I will have abandoned it completely, and we'll just be tucking plants in chaotically wherever they can go. Things will fail, things will be overcrowded. If I were to hold this idea of like, I need to have a perfect garden, and it needs to be the
Mhm.
best garden on the block, and it needs to produce enough vegetables so that I don't have to go to the grocery store, or whatever the goal may be, if I held those goals super, super tightly, I would
Yeah.
never try new things, and every year in the garden, I try to grow something new
Yeah.
just to see what will happen. And can I do it? And will it work? And, if I was holding success so tightly, then I wouldn't leave space for that.
Yeah.
Um, so this idea of like trying things and not really having a lot of expectation for how it might go,
Mhm.
um, really frees you up to try a lot of things, and knowing, and part of that is also not just holding success, but like if you don't like it, holding the idea that you don't have to keep doing every single
Yeah.
thing you try. You can hold that lightly too. And if you try something and you're like, not for me, you move on and try something else. And that applies, I think, to mental health skills too. I think in our last interview, I said something about how I had a lot of like non-starters with my recovery, right?
Mm.
Like before I really started being able to consistently implement the skills and truly understanding what I was doing. And even then, I was like, start, stop, start, stop, start, stop. If I was constantly holding on to this, like, I need to be the best at this, I need to get it in the first try, I need to, I don't know if I would have recovered
Yeah.
because I certainly didn't on the first try. So it's just being able to hold things a little bit less lightly or a little bit more lightly.
This is a great instruction for everybody watching today. Of course, we're going to be exploring some changes in skills around recovery, and if, as can often be the case here, coming to the live stream, be like, I'm going to find the right special formula for recovery, and where there's going to be this special click or insight moment. Yeah, maybe hold it just a little lightly. As Kelly was saying, there are going to be some things you hear. That maybe you like, some things you hear that you dislike. We don't know. The things you like might actually be the unhelpful things, and the things you hear that you dislike may be the really helpful things.
Oh, yeah.
Trying them out, though, there's not going to be any great special, you know, I don't know what we'd call it, special moment, like sparks and unicorns prancing around. It's not going to
Yeah.
happen just from something you hear here. It's going to be about trying things and, yeah, trying them lightly and seeing what happens.
Yeah, and to your point, I love all the things I really loved were the things that I should not be doing. They were not serving me, and I really hated a lot of the stuff I was implementing. So get curious about about that, about the things you love.
Yeah, I think that's the thing in this weird, again, to where you mentioned about being ourselves, this fascinating paradox of kind of dropping what we thought of or the story of ourselves. Because, yeah, it's very likely I was the same. I see this all the time. We go searching for a solution that really fits our compulsions. We're like, I'm going to control and clean away perfectly all of the thoughts. So what's this like really controlling solution that's going to be
Yeah.
really intense and hard, and we're going to get rid
Mhm.
of everything, and we like that because that's how we got to this point.
Yeah.
But yeah, the taking the new path through the forest, we're probably going to see some things that we've been like, oh yeah, I'm not the type of person who likes beautiful views. I want to go dig in a swamp. I
Big
love
in a
that.
swamp. Love
Yeah.
that. Love that for you.
Just
Yeah, and
gonna go ahead. Yeah.
I was just gonna say, I think I hear this sometimes too, and we got questions about this, I think, so we'll get to it. But
Mhm.
when we even think about the concept of recovery, a lot of times the questions that you hear from people or the tone that a conversation takes is like, when do I get recovery?
Yeah.
Like it's something I'm going to like give
Thank you.
you, like yes. And when do I get that? And my favorite answer to that is like, I mean, uh, does now work for you?
Yeah.
Because I
Now's a
mean,
good
you
time.
could do it right now. The second that you make the decision to walk off the battlefield, as you say, right? The second that you make the decision to start letting your values lead and not giving your energy in service of you know trying to control your thoughts and feelings or letting your thoughts and feelings control you, the second that you make that decision, like, welcome, congratulations, you
Mhm.
are
You
you
get the
are recovered.
certificate. Yeah.
We will, your unicorn will be in the mail post haste. I mean, like, that's it. And so
Yeah.
then we can have I think, a more productive conversation about, so like, what do you really want to be doing? What do you really want to be building? I think the concept of recovery is sometimes a barrier for people because they do see it as that destination they have to get to. And so I always am telling people like, well, do you want to be there? Great. congratulations, you're here. Now let's talk about what you're going to do here.
It's a really good point for anything we explore today too, because I think there'll still be that hint of like, oh, okay, is this where you're going to share the thing that's going to like let me go to the place? But it really is. I always emphasize this with people. There's no difference. Like if you're struggling right now, there's no difference between a person who's struggling and somebody who's left a mental illness behind in terms of the choice we have in this moment. All we ever have is a choice in this moment to have experiences, have whatever's in our context, and make a choice that's aligned with our values. And so there's no special place to go to. And I know there's a question about that we'll get to that I thought touches on this, which is about like, do you ever get bored of doing? I think it says like, yeah, do you ever? We'll start with that.
Yeah, let's say
Yeah, do you ever? Here's the question: do you ever feel tired of doing valued actions, and just not? And this is and just not having enough willpower and distracting yourself. So maybe this leads into what we were just talking about here. Do you ever get tired of doing things that you love
no,
doing?
no, never. It's
Mhm.
amazing. I think here there's some misunderstanding around what valued actions are, what value driven
Mhm.
behavior is, right? In this question. So I think it's super important. Like, no, I never get bored or tired or exhausted from living a like fully self-actualized, deeply present life. It's lovely. It's wonderful. If you think valued actions are exhausting, I would say maybe you need to re-examine what you're doing, because it sounds like maybe we're just trying to distract ourselves away from thoughts and feelings, or push thoughts and feelings away, and that's very exhausting.
Mhm.
Like if you're constantly like this with your feelings and thoughts, that's very exhausting. So but that's not what value living a value driven life is. So yeah. Does that make sense?
Yep, that totally makes sense. I think, yeah, let's leave that there because I think we'll keep coming back to that because this is maybe one of the tricky parts of it that people,
Yeah.
the fight, like learning to drop that fight with it, like yeah, because it's the fight that's exhausting. If an intrusive thought's
Yeah.
coming up, and we're like, that shouldn't be here. When's it going to go away? Why is it here? What's like all of that
Yeah.
about a thought is one exhausting and two guarantees it's going to come back because I always find it useful to see the brain as a puppy. The brain does not actually speak whatever languages you speak. It just knows attention. So if it brings you a dead squirrel and you're like, "Arr," and like trying to take the squirrel away, the
Love
puppy is
that.
just gonna go, I must bring more dead squirrels because this is
Oh
so fun. Look at all of this attention. And that's all the brain's doing. And so, yeah, if we're still fighting it and like,
yeah.
when's it gonna stop bringing dead squirrels? It's gonna bring a lot more dead squirrels.
So many. Oh, the whole neighborhood is in
Yeah,
peril
think
at
of the
this point.
squirrel population.
Think of the squirrels. Please don't encourage your puppy brain. Yeah, it's an acceptance question, right? That at its
Yeah.
core, that's an acceptance question, and we know that acceptance is a particularly challenging skill to learn, or kind of a hump to get over for people. So, I to your point, there was a question specifically that mentioned acceptance too, and maybe I'm kind of jumping over to that, but this that they're both acceptance questions. And
Yeah.
the analogy I like to give is, um, let's say I lost my job, and
Mhm.
here's me right here, and here is the experience of losing my job over here. A lot of people think that acceptance means that I'm doing something in this space between
Mm.
me and the experience of losing my job. I gotta like do something in this
Yeah.
space, and I can't figure out what it is I'm supposed to do. But really, what acceptance is me, experience of losing my job, values, life I want to build, things I want to happen, things I want to give energy to, things I want to do. Acceptance is the stuff I'm doing over here while this
Yes.
thing exists over here.
Yeah.
And that there's nothing for me to do between me and the experience of me losing my job. There isn't anything for me to do. So that's why when people are like, I just don't know how to accept it. Right. Because you're probably trying to work in this space and there is
Yes.
nothing for you there. Everything for you is over here between you and your values. And it doesn't mean pushing that experience away and ignoring it. It just means letting it exist there
Yeah.
and working over here. And so when you think about valued behavior, if value driven behavior is exhausting, that's probably because you're trying to work over here while also trying to work over here, while building a cage around this, while
Yeah.
trying to paint over it to make it look like something else. Well, you're still doing a lot of stuff over here. And
Yeah.
and you just need to completely you're over here in this space. I'm a very tactile learner, so
I was
I'm
gonna
like,
say that's a
I need
great way to
diagrams.
visualize it.
Yeah.
Because I think even seeing ourselves as kind of turning, we could. When it comes up, I always love to point out anything. Like if I'm working with a coaching client or something, we'll often talk about something behind them. And so yeah, like I would, right now I would always ask somebody, how are you accepting all of the books behind you? Because there's so many, and I think like a couple of them are wrong. And
Yeah.
yeah, like it would involve you turning away to be actively. I can't. We'll come back to the interview in a second because there's like 100 books I need to accept here.
Completely need to work on all of them. Yeah.
Oh, they can just be there.
Yeah. Yeah. And you will find, you know, I think finding if we go back to basics of value driven
Mhm.
behavior, um, it is hard at first, right? Because
Yeah.
I don't want to take away from the fact that like your life has probably been really taken up by, whatever it is that you're, excuse me, trying to control. And sometimes it's hard to know, like, well, what are my value driven behaviors, right? And what am I supposed to be doing? And that journey alone is so valuable and so important and a kind of a journey of self-discovery that you won't be super great at it first. So here's a
Yeah.
moment where we can also hold this lightly,
Yeah.
right? And bring in some curiosity. Because like, I'm talking right when I got out of the hospital. So, like, ground zero work for me. I think I talked about this before, but I had a list of, like, it was like midnight, 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m. It was a timetable for 24 hours. And in each single one, I wrote a thing I could be doing in that moment that was practical for the time of day, that was in some way connected to my values. Looking back now, it was rather loosely connected to my values because I honestly just didn't really know what they were. But the point is none of these behaviors were compulsions. So when I felt the need to do compulsions and I could not get my head around what to do instead, I pulled out my little timetable and it was a godsend. I would say for about maybe like just a couple of weeks. It was a relatively short time period because I really did dive into the work of trying to discover my values and get some more, meaty things in there for me to do. But stuff like examples of things on this list were things like walk the dog, read a book, call a friend, work on my knitting, take a walk outside. It was ground zero, really basics, right? Because at that point, I really didn't know what my values were. I hadn't done that work yet, but I needed to get away from compulsions. And it really did serve me pretty well for the first couple of weeks because I just needed something to go to. And that's really also in line with kind of what we're talking about having something to build, having a place to go to.
I think it's really key because the uncertainties and the fears will always be so clear. When we're struggling with intrusive thoughts, obsessions, yeah, OCD, anxieties, whatever, depression, the questions, the things the brain will throw up will be so clear, and it's so difficult then to go, okay, I'm not going to answer this very clear question that's very threatening. I'm instead going to do what? And without that really clear map to
Yeah.
show us where to go, it's so easy to go back to the old things because, as well, we're also that engine that runs on fear and fixing things it's such a sports car engine, and we're like, but this, if I just sit down and I solve this, I'm gonna feel things about solving
Mhm.
it, and that's going to feel like we're moving. And then at first, yeah, that values based engine, it's not built the same. It's going to be better. It's going to be that it's going to be able to take us so many places that we never could with the fear fueled engine, and it's much healthier for everything else in the environment around us,
Yeah,
which is,
the
yeah,
all-wheel
burning
drive.
values. Yeah, but yeah, it's not built yet.
No.
And I was actually, I thought this was great. A bunch of community members submitted questions around this and pointed out the difficulty of not having problems to fix. I think one of the things that will so often bring people back into the compulsions is that it's so weird that we get the freedom now to do the things we want to do, and it's not based around fixing whatever random fear the brain throws up. So
Yeah.
maybe let's cover some of those questions. There's kind of I made a little section called switching the focus from problems to values, and there's three questions here, and let's start with this statement. So they just said, just the fact that it is so damn hard for me to not have a problem or something.
Yeah. I love though how you're making not having a problem your new problem. Um, that's fun. That's a fun trick that the brain plays.
Mhm.
Yeah, gosh, yes. I really relate to that. The the quiet was terrifying at
Yes.
first. And I also just felt like so much of my identity was really wrapped up in being a problem solver.
Mhm.
And I always joke that OCD gave me some of my most marketable qualities. Like I was just really um a professional problem solver. And I had to really learn to appreciate the freedom that comes from not having a problem to solve. And learning to build the awareness of when am I trying to solve a problem that isn't really a problem and doesn't really need to be solved, and you'll find yourself doing that a lot. So the more that you build awareness, the more you'll be like, oh wow, I don't really care about that. About solving that. And you'll notice when other people do it too. Like you'll notice when other people kind of create problems out of thin air, and that isn't a very interesting experience to interact with as well.
Just looking for a thing to do, because if we associate safety with fixing
Yeah.
a thing,
Yeah.
then yeah, it feels so terrifying not to be fixing a thing. But then
Yeah.
either the brain is going to create a thing to fix, or we're gonna just like flip the table. So okay, now I have to pick everything up. Like, whew, I have something to do.
And I think too, Mark, like if you are a person who really enjoys solving problems or thinks you enjoy
Mhm.
solving problems or is known for
Yeah.
being a problem solver, then you also may have that some of your identity wrapped up
Oh
in
yes.
being a problem solver. And when you let that go, that's very scary, because then you're like, well, but then who am I? You start having these really existential kind of questions. And that can be scary too, but learning how to find freedom in the fact that, like, well, you don't have to solve those problems. Who do you want to be? What do you want to be spending with spending your time and energy on? I get a lot of DMs that are just problem creation at their core, right? It's like that's really all the person is doing, is kind of spinning their wheels, making a problem out of no problem. And I will often, I think, probably infuriate people because my response will be like one line. And it's like, what would you like to be spending your time and energy on? Because is it this? I don't know that it's this. Like, I don't know you very well, but I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that it's not this. So, but that question itself, if you're having trouble with that problem thing, is a very useful question, because whenever you catch yourself maybe starting to get into the weeds with a problem that's not really a problem, or the act of like looking for problems, you can ask yourself, like, what is it that I want to be spending my time and energy on? Is it this? It's probably not. It almost never is. Not really.
That's a super useful question, because even that urge to write out the problem, to even like kind of like get that feeling that I've completely described the problem and all of the different elements. And yeah, no, just asking before you start writing out that huge description of the problem, do I actually, is there something else I'd rather be growing?
Yeah.
And that's, I
Yeah.
think, where that list, like you were describing, comes in really handy at first, because, yeah, that description of the problem, it's there, it's ready to go, and being able to say, yeah, and I am going to pick up this knitting right now, and I'm going to go sit there, and the brain's like, but you're not a person who knits, you're a person who solves problems. You're like, well, now I knit. That's it.
That's who I am now.
That's
Yeah.
all I do.
That's all I do. It really is. That's all I do.
That's enough. I'm gonna say Ice Barrage is in the member chat. I don't know, Kelly, can you see the member chat, or
I
can
can.
only?
Yeah,
Oh, you can.
I
Ice
can see
Barrage,
it.
thanks for holding down the member chat. I will. I'll just check out what you just said here, because I know you were responding to as we were discussing. Said, I find that when I try to not do compulsions around something I care about, the emotional reaction and load my brain puts me under makes the thing I care about not enjoyable anymore. Do you just have to put blind trust in that thing will become enjoyable once you're over the uncertainty curve? Yeah, maybe let's talk a bit about enjoyment. Thanks for sharing that, Ice Barrage. Yeah, what do you think about enjoyment?
I think that that's a feeling that you don't need to be trying to get. But yeah, I mean, I think enjoying things is great. I personally love enjoying things. It's one of my favorite things to do. However, doing things because I'm trying to get that feeling of enjoyment out of them, is just another way of controlling my feelings, right? So I think the question more is, why are you doing the thing that you're doing? Is it connected to your values? And if so, then that's great. You don't need to be looking to get a certain feeling out of that experience. And sometimes you may find it more enjoyable than others, and that's cool. That's great. But it doesn't mean that anything's wrong when maybe you're not enjoying it as much as you normally do. That's just a checking thing. And I also would say to the second part of that question about should you have blind trust, 1,000%. I love blind trust. Super useful skill in this process. If you are willing to have blind trust, you're going to be a star. You're going to go so far. Yeah. So yeah. What about you, Mark? What do you think?
I I'm reminded of, we were talking about gardens earlier, and I've been doing these workshops with the metaphor of drawing yourself as a garden. And one of the reasons for that is because, just as you mentioned, if we're looking for a feeling, even though these are these feelings that say, oh, but, you know, of course I want to enjoy things, or I want to be happy. But it becomes just like clean. Like if we're doing it and then checking the feeling, then of course the brain doesn't give us the feeling. And it helps to instead approach it as caring for a garden, where we say, look, I know these things are beneficial to me as a garden. Like these things are going to help me grow. But as I'm doing it right now, yeah, I may not have this like great feeling of going to water the garden. It's not doing anything, it's not producing anything, but I'm going to do it. I know this is a practice of caring for myself. And again, because when we were struggling, a lot of the things we like doing, we now see were really destructive and led to long-term outcomes that weren't enjoyable. And so also, yeah, it's very likely that long-term enjoyment, really enjoying the garden in a couple months, is going to come from, yeah, sometimes going out to take care of the garden when it doesn't feel amazing.
And it
Let it
frequently
grow.
doesn't. feel amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. How is when you take care of your gardens, is
Mhm.
it 1000% always enjoyable?
God, no. No. I mean, I have a fairly large vegetable garden, and it takes approximately an hour to deeply water. And
Yeah.
in the summer, that is a lot. I use primarily a rain barrel. I really try to, which is not as efficient as a hose, right? There's a lot of trips back and forth to the rain barrel, and it takes a long time, and and there are days when I enjoy it. There are days when the sun is shining and it's nice and I don't have anywhere to be, and I go out. My kids laugh at me because I talk to like animals, and I'm like in my head Snow White potentially, and I'm like saying hello to the bumblebees,
Yes.
and it's lovely. And then there are days where I have to be somewhere in 15 minutes and I am rushing and there is not time and I'm hurrying, and I just noticed aphids on the kale and there are slugs eating the chard, and it is not enjoyable, but I do it anyways. I think another really great example that people tend to resonate with that we use frequently is the gym or
Yeah.
physical fitness. I tell my son there has almost never been a morning where I have gone to the gym and felt like going to the gym. I didn't do it for that. I don't do it for that reason. And even when I'm at the gym, there are some workouts that I'm like really feeling it and it's great. And I'm feeling really alive and vital and energetic. And then there are days where I feel like I am made of Twinkies and and everything hurts and is hard and I feel, and I go anyways because to your point, Mark, I'm taking care of a longer term, project, right? It's taking care of my body in the long term and working out to be functional, working out so that I can still water my garden when I'm 80 years old. Those are the reasons that I get up and do those things. This is not for the enjoyment.
Making that switch feels maybe terrifying or uncertain. I think there's a question here, or it's about it being scary. Uh, on the same topic, the question here is: it feels scary to leave it behind and not do compulsions. How to let that go and leave it behind? Like coming into this new version of myself feels so weird, awkward, strange after being used to the broken anxiety identity for so long. The transition feels so weird. Yeah, did you find anything helpful when you were like, doing something that, yeah, is aligned with kind of who you knew you were, but then also feels so weird and different?
Yeah. Okay, so there's this thing that I talk a lot about, and it's shoulding. Don't should all over the place. And a lot of times when we're trying something new and it doesn't feel the way that we want it to feel or think it should feel, where there's that word, right? This I should feel happy. I should feel different. I'm making good changes. It shouldn't be scary. It should be easy. I'm self-actualizing. It should feel great, you know. So dropping the shoulds, and one thing I did when I was really in the beginning stages in that scary space that this person is describing is is part of this no shoulding thing where I would say to myself when I would kind of start to get caught up in that, like, this is so scary, everything's so weird, I feel like a baby, like just figuring out how to walk. I would tell myself, this is just how you feel right now. That's okay. Like, it's cloudy today, and that's okay. And this is just how I feel today, and that's okay. And that was me really affirming for myself that it didn't need to be a certain way. I didn't need it to be sunny outside, just like I didn't need to feel like I knew what I was doing. I could feel scared. I could feel awkward. I could feel uncertain. This is just how I feel today, period. There was no qualifier at the end of that. And I think that statement really got me through some of my hardest days. I had a lot of right kind of in this transition period where I was going from, deciding to make the changes, I had a lot of that like deep personalization, derealization feeling where I just didn't feel like myself, which is also kind of, I think, sort of wrapped up in what this person is asking too, that sensation of like, I don't feel like me. I don't feel right. Um, and and I just would say that to myself over and over. This is just how you feel today. And then it's the pivot that we were talking about earlier, right? Then it's the okay, over here now.
That's a great illustration of that practice too, of starting to, like I said, I would say seeing that the journey is the practice of even saying, okay, I am going to take this path and I'm the person who's going to have these feelings rather than like being wrapped up in them. Like if I'm having this weird feeling, then I'm doing something weird
Yes.
versus, I don't know, yeah, I'm doing a thing and it feels weird. And that's to be
Yeah.
expected because, yeah, I'm taking this new path in the forest. So, yeah, it feels strange.
There's a lot of diffusion skills at play there too, which I
Yeah.
probably forget. It's been so many years. I feel like sometimes I skip over things I did, and I imagine that I probably was, just in case anybody hasn't heard of this term before, there is a concept in ACT called cognitive fusion, and cognitive fusion is this idea that you are fused with your thoughts, right? And so it's like I'm anxious instead of I'm having the feeling of anxiety. That's the difference between a cognitive fused and being cognitively diffused. And cognitive diffusion is super helpful when if you are feeling really wrapped up in your thoughts and learning to kind of build that separation and being able to say like I'm just having this feeling today like is an act of separating yourself from the thought, which is super, super useful if your thoughts are historically in the driver's seat, then that separation can be a game changer. And I used a lot of cognitive diffusion tools in my recovery journey. My favorite is that I am having the feeling of another one that I like. I think this came from Russ Harris's book, The Happiness Trap, which is there's the whatever story. So a lot of people who have really familiar stories that start up in their brains or fears that start up in their brains, super useful to when your brain does that to be like, oh, there's the I'm gonna die someday story, there's the, oh, nobody loved me story. You will be shocked at how much air you take out of that thought when you do that. When you name it like that and separate from it in that way, you take so much power out of it and it really does help build that separation. So if it's like, oh, here's that I feel awkward and weird today, there's the awkward and weird today story again, like my brain is like, oh, you know so learning some of those diffusion skills can also really help.
Because it goes after those shoulds too. Because implicit
Yeah,
in all of those is like, oh, I shouldn't be having that, or I should feel different right now. Like I shouldn't have that story. It shouldn't bring the dead squirrel. But yeah, when we're like, I love that puppy. It brings a dead squirrel every day.
right. Sorry about the chime. I think you guys I have a meditation reminder on my phone, and yeah, I think my bell just went off.
Oh,
So
is it time to meditate?
time, everybody stop what you're doing.
Meditate. That there is a question about meditation. It was specifically they were curious about how you explore meditation. So maybe yeah, let's talk about that. I just want to say, Kimberly, welcome in the chat too. Thank you so much for the donation. Kimberly said thank you to you as well, Kelly. Thanks for being here, Kimberly.
Thanks
The
for being here,
let's
Kimberly.
let's talk about meditation and mindfulness. Yeah, this question was specifically for you, Kelly. It says, Kelly, do you incorporate mindfulness and meditation into your life? Yes, right now. And if
So,
so, how do you practice? So maybe, yeah, can you share about even like what that chime was
yeah,
doing? What do you like to explore? Yeah,
sure. That chime is from the Plum Village app. Highly recommend.
great app.
I know Mark was going to be happy about that too. Yeah, you're a user as well. Um, Yeah, Plum Village is Thich Nhat Hanh's center in France, though they have locations, I think, globally. Mark can probably speak more to Plum Village than I can, but I really love their meditation app. And there's just so many wonderful talks on there too, just aside from meditation. There's just so much fantastic content. But yes, well, I do meditate, as the chime may have given away. I do a couple different things. So that particular chime is just like a come back to yourself chime. It actually goes off every hour at the top of the hour on my phone. So if, depending on how long we're on, you may hear it again in an hour. Um, and that is I- every time there is a practice. I think they do this at Plum Village
Yes.
too, where at the top of the hour there is a chime, and it is kind of a call to come back to oneself, right? And to stop and like take a breath and really drop into your body. And there are a lot, I think, of monasteries and practices who have a similar kind of thing that they do. And so that's what I do. And every time my phone chimes at the top of the hour, it is a reminder to me to come back home to my this is home to myself. I usually will stop whatever I'm doing and take a few breaths and just kind of check in and make sure I'm present and in the moment, and um, where I want to be cognitively and emotionally, and that now. Oh, did I lose you for a second?
I don't know who, yeah, on whose end it cut out. It cut out just, at least on my end, just, yeah, you were talking about coming to yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, so the chime goes off at the top of the hour every hour, and it's just a reminder to kind of drop back into myself. So that's one of my meditation practices, I suppose. And then I do a daily sitting meditation too. Most days, and there are days where it doesn't happen. I kind of just like the gym, right? But primarily, it is part of my kind of regular care for myself, and practice in keeping my observational skills sharp, right? Those self-observational skills. And then as far as mindfulness goes, I mean, I'm never not. Surely try. The goal is to never not be mindful. I try to do everything with presence. And this top of the hour chime and that reminder to be dropping in and checking with myself, that supports the mindfulness, right? That really is supporting that practice. My daily sitting meditation supports that kind of 24/7 mindfulness. And yeah, absolutely. Like I would say like a year ago, I wasn't so good at it. And I had like a kind of a big uncertainty thing happen, and I got even on the phone with you, Mark, and you're like, well, how's your practices going? And I was like, oh, I haven't meditated in a little minute. Maybe we need to start doing that again. So I'm not perfect, right? But yes, I would say that my regular practice of kind of dropping in and regular sitting meditation, and then just this kind of a regular awareness of being mindful, um, supports everything ground up. Super important.
Massively, because even having something throughout the day there that helps us just notice if we've started to just spin the wheels up, and now, and it, because it doesn't seem like a big deal, and then we're thinking about this thing, and I'm controlling this thing, and there's what about this thing, and we're just stacking on these dishes. And having that moment, like even going back to that question you mentioned earlier, having that moment to just notice all of the maybe problems we're holding and go, do I actually want to be spending time and energy on this? And yeah, what would I rather spend time and energy on right now?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
Even going back to the question earlier about like, do you get tired of it? I think sometimes, and I'll hear people say like, am I going to have to be mindful all of the time? And again, yeah, it's probably just like if you're finding values exhausting, you're probably trying to do something really intense as mindfulness, and it's like not mindfulness. It's letting it be easy. It's going to
Yeah.
be dropping extra stuff
Yeah.
and being lazy
I'm
with
being lazy.
whatever
Oh,
the brain is throwing up. Should we explore some around the idea of like the yeah? Sometimes we wander off the path and we explore. I always find it's so useful if we're in the wilderness and we run off the path because we're like, I think there's something really important under that rock. Then yeah, it makes sense. We find ourselves standing off somewhere in the forest, and I think this is interesting to explore when we wander off because people will put a lot of shoulds and judgments on, like I'll often describe if people are approaching recovery as a crystal piss pot. They're like, I must never break it, and it's this really special perfect thing, but then we're already back into the compulsions. So there are a
yeah.
couple of questions here. Maybe they're all kind of short, so I think I'll read them all because I think then we'll explore this as a topic. Uh, how do you, and because this also relates to the how do you look back at times when you were struggling? So yeah, someone said you live with the memory of it, how do you deal with the fear of it all happening again? How do you look back on times when you were struggling with compassion? Was also a question there. Do you experience any relapses, and how do you handle new skill fear, and how do you remain consistent?
Okay. Yes. Okay. So let me start with the compassion question really quick. I'm going to kind of take an arc here.
Okay.
How do I look back uh, with so much compassion? Um, yeah, there's why would I why would I choose to look back with anything else, right? It's a decision.
With
Just
anger,
just scorn, just so much
shame.
scorn.
Yeah.
Shame, yeah. It's just a decision. I wouldn't ever choose to look back with anything but compassion. I think the question, what I hear there is maybe like regret. Like I think they're asking like, do I have regret or grief about it? Um, yeah, sure, it sucked. Like, do I wish it didn't happen to me? Of course, but there would be no point in pretending that I didn't. I'm not going to come up here and spout some bullshit. It's like I'm so grateful for it. No, it sucked.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of money. I've talked to you before. I've went into debt, financial debt that took me years to pay off because in service of OCD. Yeah, for sure. There has been. I have allowed myself to kind of grieve. Like, wow, that was so hard. But again, even there, it's like it's compassionate grief. It's like I'm like, girl, that was so tough. Good job. I'm so sorry you had to go through that. Right. That's kind of like how I would talk to myself about it. And then letting that go. I think there is an element for some people of like really wanting to hold on to that because they want to try to somehow get okay with it. Right. I want to feel okay about the fact that I went through this struggle. And that's just another controlling thing, just like the enjoyment thing we were talking about earlier. It's the same thing. So allowing yourself to have whatever feelings you do have about it, hopefully compassion is among them, and then letting that go because there's nothing else for you to do there. So that's that. And then okay, so then I think the next thing I'll talk about is afraid of it happening again.
Mm.
I really like talking about this because about a year ago, it kind of did. Everybody's going to just drop out of they're like hang up now. She's not really recovered. Um but no, it was actually great, and I kind of chronicled it like on my Instagram. I was really open about it and honest about it. Because it was also fascinating. So here's what happened. I had a very real uncertainty happen in my life that was not made up. A lot of when I was struggling with OCD, my uncertainties were all made up. I'm most of them were all completely fabricated. This was a very real true uncertainty, real uncertainty. And not the first uncertainty I've had. It's not as though I was untested, right? I got through COVID as a person with whose obsessions were all health related. So
Mhm.
I feel like, we were tested. But anyways, I had a very real uncertainty pop up in my life. And I just kind of, I don't know, I made some bad decisions, right? And kind of found myself teetering down that hill. And but here's the fun part. Maybe not fun, but the good part. Immediately was like the landing gear went down, right? And it was like, whoa, 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 wait. And I called in my supports because I felt a little unsteady. And I called Mark. I was like, Mark, help. And I called my old therapist and I pulled out my notes from like deep, deep. And I was like, we're going back to school. And I just really threw the landing gear down because one thing I found that was so interesting was I had sort of picked up a couple of compulsions, old compulsions in this time. And it's like I picked them up and I was kind of like holding them. And I was like, what am I going to do with this? And it felt really foreign to do that. It felt very strange to pick those compulsions up because I haven't lived my life that way for so long. And I credit that to being the reason that I was like, wait a minute. And I just stopped, took stock of where I was and what had happened and what skills I was practicing or not practicing. And I think it was so valuable because I hate the word relapse. This is kind of what has come out of this because the reason I don't like the word relapse is because I realized I could never go back to square one. It was never going to happen. I know too much. I would have to unlearn so many skills. I mean, like maybe if I got amnesia, I could go back to square one, but I just don't see a reality in which I would ever go back to square one. I only made it back like maybe 10 squares before I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. And very quickly pulled myself back onto the path. And so that's also why I say, recovery is the path and you can be on it at any point that you choose because I did kind of find myself off in the shoulder and then just got back on. I had to come to terms with that, what I was experiencing in my life and allow like this is a big scary uncertainty relating to somebody that I would take a bullet for. And, like, wow, I have to hold this. I have to figure out how to hold this and allowing that to happen without picking up compulsions. And again, like I said, picking up the compulsions felt very weird. It did not feel normal to me to do. I think the other thing I'll say about that was really useful is way back when I was in program. For people who don't know, just really quickly, I was hospitalized and I went into like a partial hospitalization program for OCD recovery. It was an ACT-based program. Super lucky to have access to that, and it kind of was like boot camp for my brain. And one of the therapists in that program said to us, and I remember thinking, whatever. It's not if you relapse, it's when. And I really appreciate at the time, I was like, you don't know me. I'm number one at everything I do. um, but in hindsight, I really appreciated that comment because what I realized he was trying to say was like, it doesn't mean everything explodes and you have to turn in your badge and quit everything when this happens. It means that it happens to people and it's okay and you can get back on the path and it's not a be all end all. And so yeah, so that was kind of my experience of and a lot of people ask me like, well, how long did it last? That's a big question. And it does, I mean, I don't know. I don't remember. It wasn't long because once I noticed that I was off the path, then I know how to get back. Mark, I feel like most of my call with you was just you being like, you know what to do, and me being like, I know what to do. And you being like, you know what to do. And me being like,
Really, yeah. You explained everything you were gonna do. Yeah.
it was just us, me telling you I know what to do was most of our call. Not really. You gave me some really, you helped me
No, it
realize.
was. You had a great plan. Yeah.
So kind of realized to be done, or where I was, I knew what needed to be done to get back in. And so I did. And that was that. And and I'll talk really quick just about the greenhouse, because that's such a I have a community greenhouse at the end of my driveway. It's like a little free library, but it's for plants. And I built this during that time because I was kind of coming back to, I can't control this experience that I'm having over here that's got this fraught with uncertainty and was very scary. Um, but I can dive deep into my values. And I did that in a number of ways. But the most visible way I did that was by building this greenhouse. I love plants. I love community. I have a lot of values around building community and being of service to others and sharing. And I got this harebrained idea to build a little tiny greenhouse and built it with my own two hands, installed it in the ground with my own two hands. Uh, and it was just so cool because it still to this day reminds me of like the scary experience and how I didn't slide back and how I did not uh, have it all happen again, right? So it's just a very tangible reminder
That's
of
amazing.
like, yeah, the work works. So,
I
and then,
think
okay, so,
I
oh, go
was just
ahead,
gonna
go.
say, because yeah, even having that thing to really step on the gas towards,
Hmm.
because there is that element. For whatever reason, so often when we wander off the path, and hopefully nobody will ever do this when you're hiking, we have this tendency to go, "Oh, I wandered off the path. Well, I'm going to punish myself by getting more lost." And so
Keep
they
going.
you saw, oh, okay, actually, okay, we're way off the path. Like, here's a thing that takes me back on it, and let's go towards it. That's really skillful because the brain loves to just go, oh, let's go, like, let's, yeah, we could go back there, sure, but let's keep charging towards these other things that
And that
send us wandering.
that was the big thing that I did, right? I'm not saying everybody who's struggling, you need to go like build a community greenhouse, but
But
I
it's
did
okay if
a
you do.
number of,
Everybody, if you do
it's
build
fine if
it,
you
that's
do.
fine. That's great.
Highly recommend. Reach out to me. I'll send you plans for how to do it. Um, but yeah, I did a lot of the smaller things too, right? Like I put my meditation back practice back into play. I made sure that I was, taking care of myself. I really checked in with the kind of narrative stuff that I was maybe getting wrapped up in some rumination and without realizing it. Um, and I was doing all of these small things too, but yeah, the greenhouse was this very big, tangible, thing that you could see me really yanking the wheel back onto the path.
Now the community has plants.
Oh my god, and it has blown up. It's crazy. It's the little blue greenhouse. It's on Instagram. You'll see me post about it every once in a while. It's got its own account, but yeah, it's crazy how much my community embraced it. I thought I was just going to be the only one putting plants in it, and no, I almost never put things in there now. The community just there's stuff out there today. It's just it goes. And I have a harebrained idea for another little free thing that I'm going to build on the other side of my driveway to be like announced. So
I
there's a
look
little teaser for you.
forward to hearing about it. Yeah, I follow the greenhouse now. It's
Good times. It's good
yeah,
stuff.
it's amazing to follow a greenhouse. I think on that too, just like, thanks for sharing that. I think it's so useful to see because I would say it's almost guaranteed that on the journey there are these kind of types of uncertainties that a person will have to learn how to have and not go back to the old way that we used to get security. And that's all it is. We encounter something that's new, that feels more threatening, and we have this default way of trying to get security. And I think, yeah, a real thing happening is always one of them, something physical happening there. And then they're so useful to see what takes us off. Because then we say, oh, okay, well, this thing was different in this way and this way. And then we see those kind of stories where we said, oh, well, if it's different in this way, then I should do the compulsions. And now we get to say, okay, I see that. And next time that happens, there's a different way I can interact with it. But kind of until we have those experiences.
Oh,
Did
I think I
yeah,
dropped
it
off
cut out
again.
there? Welcome
Sorry.
back. No, I was just saying until we have those experiences, we kind of don't get to learn those skills. So we kind of have to have them. We
Yeah.
have to have an experience of running off the path. There was a related to this topic. I have a prop for this one. There was a question related to this topic, and I don't. Yeah, there we can go. I can get back over it. So it said it's related to this. It's about how to accept the lost time due to, and then Instagram just cut it off at that point. Like when I saw it, it just said how to accept the lost time due to men. But then apparently, if you hit the more, it also said mental illness.
Yeah.
But I feel like both can go in because a lot of people will struggle with relationship OCD compulsions because they'll
Mhm.
go, what if they're the wrong one? And then I've spent time with like the wrong person, and then I don't meet the one, and then people will just avoid relationships and avoid them out of fear of uh, spending time with the wrong person. But then it also happens, of course, we'll get caught up in this obsession around the time spent on compulsions.
Yeah.
Yeah, what do you think about? Because in some ways, I would say that's a particular type of compulsion, actually, where we go this kind of, I'll often think of what I call the bad accountant, who's kind of saying, yeah, like you can't spend time on these things. That if, wrong things, and whether it's mental illness, a wrong relationship, people will do this around career, this idea I must spend life in the right way, and if I do it wrong, I now owe this debt that I must pay off with more compulsions. Yeah, do you have anything you'd recommend to people on that, like not getting caught up in that?
Yeah. I mean, I think it goes back the it's an acceptance thing, right? And so I think it's about what do you want to spend your time and energy on? Like it's as simple and as complicated as that. I
Yes.
know, um I know that's a simple answer that does frustrate people, but I feel like you can choose to spend time making yourself feel perfect about what has happened or what you have done. That's a choice you could try. I don't think you're going to enjoy the way that
You
goes.
won't get there, but
You're not going to, yeah, but I mean, by all means. Um, or you can decide what you want to build and what you want to give. And in relationships, especially, it's you know it's about figuring out like what do I want to build for my relationship, for myself, for my partner, my friends, whatever type of relationship that you're in, and how can I how can I give in order to help build those things, and how can I invest of myself and of my time and energy and to get somewhere with those. And instead, if you're asking like, well, how do I deal with you know time I lost? Well, what would you do with it? Like that's this thing again, right?
yes.
That there's time you've lost, there's time you've spent that maybe you had. I dated some toads, right? There's nothing for me to do here, right? That time is done, that relationship is over, that time was spent. So now I can figure out what I want to do over here instead. It's just kind of the same. There's nothing if and if it's a relationship that you're currently in, right? Like and you're maybe asking that question about like is this person the right person, the one, the you know, you don't know. That's a big uncertainty. Who knows? The better question is, what do you want to give to this relationship, and what do you want to build for for yourself and your partner, and how can you build that? What are some things you can do to help support that and build that? And will it all come crashing down? I don't know, maybe. And then it'll be over here, and you can turn away and go work on something else. And then it moves categories, but you don't have any control over that.
I get that. It's that trying to chase control around it and trying to chase that, like, I'm going to clean it somehow. But the
Yeah.
moments we're caught up in that, we're already doing more of the compulsions.
You had said before, when we were talking about kind of relapse, there was a question about new skill fear.
New
I
skill
don't remember
fear.
exactly. Yeah, I liked that one, because I so the I think you follow Dr. Becky at Good Inside. Are you familiar with her? She is like she does like she primarily parenting is
It is parenting.
but
I do know her. Yes.
yeah.
Yep.
So she has this video where she's speaking with some college students that I just love this concept where she talks about the space between knowing and not knowing. And the question that she first asks is like around resilience. And what does resilience feel like? And one of the students very eloquently answers that resilience is often billed as this very positive emotion. But in reality, when we are being resilient, it doesn't feel good. It is not generally a feel good space when resilience is required. And Dr. Becky talks about how the space between knowing and not knowing, this is like a resilience space, and or you could also call it like a learning space. And a lot of people have their identity tied up in knowing. I know I certainly did. My past Kelly really had a lot of self identity around being a person who knows things. And I wanted to be seen that way, and I really wanted to like be a person who knows things. And whenever I wasn't in that space, I felt like I had to do a lot of compulsions and controlling, to pretend like I wasn't, not knowing because I needed everybody to think I was knowing. And being in the space in between was really challenging for me. I didn't actually like the process of learning so much as I just liked the process of knowing the thing. So when we think about a new skill, it's about, I think, getting comfortable in that learning space, which is a resilience space, which doesn't feel good. So when I say comfortable, I don't mean liking it. I mean more of like a willingness, being willing to be in that space. And also something I think is super interesting is knowing that whenever we're learning something new, it's very normal to experience frustration in that space too. So you could say that learning space, that resilience space is also a frustration space. And when you find yourself practicing a new skill and feeling frustrated, instead of having that be something that inspires you to quit, it could be something that inspires you to notice, oh shit, I'm in the learning space. That's excellent for me because it's the only way I get from not knowing to knowing. And so yeah, new skill fear. Uh, yeah, what I think they might be describing is that frustration space, and that's okay. That's a great space to be in. It's excellent, and most of your time actually is going to be spent there, right? Because you have a period of time you spend at not knowing, and then you realize you need to get this skill over here. You're going to spend the bulk of your time in that frustration space because once you get the knowing space, it's like, oh, now we're on to learning something new. So learning how to tolerate and be willing to be in that space is so valuable.
Absolutely. It's great you brought that up because we can tie this in with kind of the physical. There were a couple questions about physical sensations, but I know at least for me, I'll often I notice that very physically.
Yeah.
And now thinking about the practice now, a lot of the times I will look for things I haven't done before or really consider what's going to be the new thing that I'll learn. Because if there's just this sense of comfort and, okay, I know what I'm doing, and sure, that can be great. We're just doing the same thing over and over again, can be nice too. But I know that looking for that not knowing and learning space is just going to be a great way to even to have new uncertainties so that I get to not start controlling and checking and fixing around them. That we can really, just like we might in the gym, if we're consistently just adding on a little bit of weight, so we just have a little bit of feeling that, oh, okay, this is a
Mhm.
little challenging. I don't know if I'm going to drop the weight right now, and that's okay if I do. And so being in that unknowing, uh, yeah, I find is really physical. And there were a couple questions about physical discomfort. I'll read them out here. Is sitting through the discomfort the best way to allow myself to fully embody the new? And how to handle the difference between the brain being okay with brain stuff, but the body still reacts, which I find that was very much the case for me. I know it comes up a lot. Yeah, what do you, even as we've kind of even using metaphors that relate to the body too.
Mhm.
Yeah, what do you think about the physical side of this adventure?
Yeah, I mean, I was the queen of somatic symptoms too, so I you know, I think
They do give
I
you
think
a special certificate and trophy for
I
that.
I
That's
do. I
yeah,
have it. I am
yeah,
credentialed. Okay.
yeah.
So, yeah. I think my first ever comment on one of your videos, Mark, was about something was somatic, like related, cuz and and reassurance, deep reassurance seeking. I think you had a video and I was like, "But what if?" You know.
It's
Um
real.
yeah. So yeah, no, for sure. And um I think it's super interesting that people like I was very surprised that my body would react to things at the time. And now I think it's kind of funny that I would be surprised. Like it's one big machine, you know. So it's not really surprising, that your brain would react or that your body would react to changes you're making with your brain. The same way, to use the engine metaphor, if you put a new engine into a car and there's a whole other system happening, you're going to notice some changes, right? Because this new engine is powering this machine differently. And so I felt like, yeah, I think one of the things that helped me was kind of going back also to the this is just how you feel statement. That's very useful for this too, for physical stuff too. Um, to be able to be like, well, I had terrible insomnia when I was first kind of starting to make these changes, just like brutal insomnia. And instead of getting wrapped up in trying to control that insomnia, and at first it was like, well, I've got to take magnesium and melatonin, and I was really making it a problem, right? And what's so funny is when I finally started employing oh, this is just how I feel. This is just what's happening to me right now. When I started employing that, truly employing that, not just saying it, but like really employing the active acceptance, um, it started getting better,
Mhm.
firstly, which may not be your experience. Your mileage may vary, but it did. And a lot of times we're just in our own way and we're adding layers of suffering and struggling and resistance, and that causes a lot of physical stress. It's stressful. You're creating mental stress, which trickles down and create your body's going to respond to that with physical stress. So removing some of those layers of resistance, removing some of the unwillingness for it to be awkward and hard and weird, and letting it be different and letting it be challenging and letting it cause you insomnia and tummy problems and headaches and
Exactly.
what are some other things I hear? Brain shocks. I hear about that one a lot. But letting it just be, and not needing to make every single one of those physical symptoms a problem that you then control, which is just a compulsion. You're just finding a new way to do compulsions. That's
Totally.
key.
Yeah, because it's all the insomnia and just sleep in general, trying to get sleep right is one of those almost guaranteed it's going to latch onto that because we don't control sleep. We don't get to flip a switch, which then immediately, especially we've been trying to control other things. It seems to be, and of course, brilliant brains. Everybody, your brains are so imaginative. It's like it knows. Oh, there's this one thing we do every day that I know you don't control, and it's just going to latch onto it. And then we get, oh, okay, no, I need to control it because it's real and I'm not sleeping and it's
Yeah.
going to affect my dating life and my work. And then you
Yeah.
see the fears it's trying to control. And the brain's like, yes, just like cheerleading on. And so, yeah, that moment we go, no, okay, it can happen. I'm going to be tired.
Yeah. I'll be tired. And this is
That's
just how
fine.
I feel today. This is just what's happening
Yeah.
to me right now. Yeah.
The weird paradox of all of this. With
Yeah.
all of them, yeah, if we make space for them, yeah, it's very likely, we don't experience them anymore, but if we do it because we want to not experience them, it's just gonna
Right.
hold on. So it
That's
is
also
really
why,
weird. And it's so weird to be light with something when it feels like you
yeah.
must hold on for dear life, literally,
Yeah.
to go, "I'm not gonna do that." Why don't we take two more questions? One about sharing things online, because I think
Mhm.
it comes up a lot. A lot of people as they're exploring their journey. Then and it connects to, you mentioned giving before too. I think when people go on this adventure, they see, wow. And I know it was this way for me. I was like, was terrible. I would never want to go back to that. I wouldn't want anybody else to experience that. Can I, yeah, share something around this?
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a question here. Dylan sent in this question. It said, you have both gone on a journey from struggling a lot with your mental health to being very mentally healthy and deciding to share supports with others online. I'm curious about how that online sharing related to your recovery. I recently heard this quote that said something like, teaching is learning twice. Did you approach sharing online as part of your recovery? Did you share about your process of learning skills while you're doing it? Or did you have a particular reason at a certain point after recovery that you went back and started trying to help others? Either way, do you think that the process of figuring out how to explain mental health concepts to others has helped build or sustain your recovery?
Yeah, this is a fun question. I started my Instagram when I was still struggling, but I would say I was like in the tail end of struggling. And it's so interesting because if you go back at the my oldest posts, you can
Oh,
kind of see like where the arc happens, or where the pivot happens. My Instagram also used to be called Motherhood Misfit way back in. And when I started, the intention behind my Instagram was um, to create a space where it was like my tagline was mothering with mental illness. That was my tagline. And I was really creating a space. What I was trying to do is create a community for mothers who struggled with mental illness. That was like my original goal, was like trying to create a space where people feel seen, which is super important to me and always has been. But what's so funny about that is in my journey of recovery, the second that I started being curious about the story I was telling myself and whether or not it was serving me, I had to get really real about like, but I don't want to be mothering with mental illness. I would very much like to be mothering without mental illness. And so maybe I need to rethink how I'm branding this platform, how I'm using this platform. And so I changed the name of my platform to Oh Hey Kelly Renee, and my content shifted as I recovered too. So at first it was really about creating a space where it was okay to be a mom who has mental illness. And look, my Instagram is still a space where it's okay to be a mom who has mental illness. It's fine. But uh I really decided that I was wanting to tell this story as I recovered, that it was like, actually, you can walk away from it because that's what I did. But yeah, you can see in the posts, like there will be a post where, I mean, there are some of my earliest posts I talk about about being in episodes or struggling with episode. And then I kind of like talk out loud about the skills I'm trying to practice. And it's very interesting. Like I not long ago went back and was kind of like looking at really old posts and was like, wow, like look at me. I'm like, you go girl. Like, I was so proud of myself because I can really see myself. There's one post in particular that I love where I was in the middle of having this kind of like obsession around thinking I was going to have a heart attack and feeling like I was going to have a heart attack. And I went for a run. And when I had this whole post and I'm all sweaty and the caption is all like, I'm having this fear about having a heart attack. And so I went for a run and I just want to like cheerlead myself, like so I did create it as like this look, I'm doing the work. And then at
Yes.
some point it shifted into more of like a teaching, like, okay, I've been there, I've done that. I've, now I'm kind of coming at it from a different angle. So yeah, you can see both. There's probably only a handful of posts where I was actually in it before you can kind of see the transition over into just more teaching. And to the question of like, uh, does teaching support the journey? Yeah, I mean, I'm a process outside my body person. I like to talk through problems. I like to talk through solutions. So I love sharing about skills. These days I've learned them, so it's more just about, I think, like reiterating them and like really it does help keep that foundation um nice and strong for me. It's really centering. It helps me really keep, it's very hard to not have these things centered in my life when I, spend a lot of time talking about them. So it does help keep them centered for sure. Um, but more for me, it is about the value of being of service to others. And to your point, Mark, like I've been in the struggle space and I know how hard it is and how um, painful it is. And to me, it just seems like such a no brainer that I would want to help anyone who might be there um, get out because, yeah, I wouldn't wish it on on anybody. So I think that's the main reason why I do what I do. I don't necessarily do it for me, but it sure it does help.
What you shared there too, I think, is a great model for how people can share if they want to get into it. Because sometimes I'll uh, hear people say that they don't feel recovered enough, or they haven't, because they haven't received, they've gotten their certificate
Yeah,
for, like all sorts of compulsions that they are like, they have their Olympic medals for all sorts of checking and things like that. But they're like, oh, but I haven't received the recovery
yeah,
certificate yet. And no, just because we benefit so much from seeing other people explore the skills and explore the work, like just like we would with physical fitness. You don't have to share about, oh, even, and it's really helpful not to share about like just like kind of like, I don't know, telling people like you should do this and you should do that and you should, no, like here's the thing I'm working on. Because I think even when we're sharing online, like it's an opportunity for us to be ourselves. So I'd
yeah,
always say too, because yeah, even this can go to even any kind of compulsions you're doing on social media for anybody. If we're trying to be somebody online that we're not, that's going to be really stressful. Yeah, just being yourself as you share is, because that can be a journey. I think, yeah, we don't have to get attached. Like actually, it's amazing, Kelly, the like that flexibility and skill to change the branding, because sometimes it's easy to get very attached to that and kind of like, oh, I have to keep like, I have to keep having a problem to share because that's the thing that my audience is looking for at that time. But to
yeah,
be like, no, nah, it can just be something that serves you. And then there's still all these amazing opportunities to give.
yeah. Yeah, and it really was walking away from having a problem, right? Because
Yeah.
I needed the mothering with mental illness was a I needed to keep having the mental illness if I was going to be aligned with that brand, and I didn't want to have the mental illness anymore. So I had to walk away from that, and the mental illness on top of it. And then I think to your point too about like um oh, what was I going to say? Oh, I lost it. Maybe it'll come back.
And that it's
It
okay if
floated
the
away.
brain wanders off, as
It just
it
floated
does.
away. That's okay.
There was, you just brought up something there that, too, that sometimes, yeah, we start doing these things because it really sucks going through it. And that, yeah, often it's very common that, yeah, the personal experience of navigating OCD and mental illness diagnoses was pretty intense and sucked a lot if we start to share about this stuff. And so I wrote this one out. Oh, I don't even know if we can get far enough back. But it's, yeah, is recovery possible if things are really bad? And so this was another one of
Uh-huh.
the questions submitted. I think it's an interesting question because it comes up a lot when we'll be talking about recovery online. Ideas around severity. Is it possible at all? Is often one of the questions. But then especially it's like, oh well, what if it's really bad? Yeah, what do you think about that question?
Yeah, I think if it's really bad, recovery is your only choice.
Yeah.
Um, it's the only option that you have. Uh, and there's also this narrative that we hear all the time where people are going to get their feelings hurt right now, but everybody thinks their brain is special. Everybody thinks their particular flavor of OCD is the hardest one. That is a very common sentiment that we hear across the board. Whatever your struggle is, whether it's OCD, anxiety, depression, everybody thinks that their brand of challenge is the hardest one. And that is a trick that your brain is playing on you to get you to stay right where you are. Um, and I will say too, there are systems out there that unfortunately prop that up, that belief. I had a therapist, not my great therapist, a couple therapists before that. I had a therapist tell me that my OCD was clinically the worst she had ever seen. How she thought that was going to be useful to me.
And she didn't give you a, did she give you a certain, like at least a medal of
It was
participation?
you would have thought
Yeah.
I didn't get
Yeah.
anything from that interaction except a very deep-seated belief that I would never
Yes.
get better. The only reward I got. And, so that's the reality of,
Yeah.
there are unfortunately not every just because somebody is a therapist doesn't mean they're a good one. And just because, somebody is a therapist doesn't mean that they have the right outcomes in hopes for you or belief that you will have a certain outcome. Mark, you've talked before about if you are working with somebody, having that outcomes conversation right at the beginning, like what is their expectation for outcomes? Because if they're the kind of person who has those beliefs about like we're just going to teach you to cope and manage yourself into a grave, then that's probably not a great relationship for you. And that it turned out that that's what that kind of therapist was. She believed that OCD was chronic and that I was just going to need to learn a lot of coping and management skills. And you know that wasn't a great great fit for me. Um so there are systems that prop up this belief that recovery is not possible or takes a certain like kind of person or flavor of OCD in order to be accessible. But I would say if things are really bad, um, recovery is the best choice. That's like saying pneumonia, if I have pneumonia, is antibiotics, is it possible? Like, yeah, I should do that immediately, as quickly as possible. So just yes, it's necessary if it's really bad.
Totally. It's, if it feels manageable, then we often get into managing and negotiating and being like, okay, I'll just do this compulsion right now. And oh, it's like, it's not so bad. And we start to just kind of limit our lives and reshape our lives around it. And even that, like it'll feel manageable because we're just progressively shrinking our lives. Yeah, if it doesn't feel manageable, that's great. Like that was, yeah, my experience, that it would not have been manageable. There was no way I
Yeah.
could continue the way I was going.
Yeah.
Yeah, I it was necessary to make these kinds of changes.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, my rock, I no, I don't. I hope nobody hits rock bottom. I hope I don't want you to hit rock bottom.
Unless
So
you're a
take it
geologist.
unless you're a geologist and then go straight there. But those of us, who have. I mean, I started working in earnest towards recovery from the hospital, from an inpatient psych ward. So it was bad. Like I don't know how we're ranking bad and if we're giving prizes for who has it the
Definitely.
worst, but like I feel like being hospitalized is bad. That's a probably a level of things are rough right now that most people can probably agree with. And that's where I started from. I don't recommend getting there. Um, I recommend starting the work significantly sooner if that is accessible to you. But if it is not, then great. That's a good wherever you are right now is a really excellent place to start.
Yeah. Exactly. Wherever we are right now is a totally doable, possible place to start. Because again, like you were mentioning at the beginning, all we have are those choices we're going to make in the next moment. If we want to get on that path, we can just do it. We can just hop on right now. And yeah, there might be a lot of really unusual, strange, uncomfortable, intense feelings while we do that. But yeah, that's the thing we're going to do starting right now.
Yeah. I welcome
Everybody.
everyone who is deciding to be recovered today. Um, Welcome. We're so glad you're here.
Congratulations, your certificate is in the mail.
You're
And yeah, and
awesome.
now we get to explore that practice of living our lives.
Yeah. What is
That's
it that you're
amazing.
gonna do with being recovered?
That question of how are you going to spend your time and energy now that, yeah, it doesn't have to be spent on the fixing problem rat wheel in our heads. Kelly, we could keep exploring this, but this is probably a good place to end for now. Uh, Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, sharing your experience here, but creating that space online to share with others to help people see there is that path, and to also the chance to connect with you. Like I find that that's been so enjoyable from my own experience navigating this
Yeah.
journey, to meet up with other people hiking similar paths in the forest. So every now and then we get to meet up in these
Right.
interesting mountain meadows on the mountains that we're exploring now. So yeah, thank you so much. Where can maybe if you can share your Instagram or how people can you'd like them to
Yeah.
find you?
Yeah. Best place to find me is on Instagram at oh hey Kelly Renee. Two E's at the end and a Y in Kelly. I'm around.
I'll put it in the description afterwards too.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you're watching this later, you can probably just hop down to the description and there'll be a link there.
Sweet. Thank you so much for having me, Mark. And thank you on behalf of everyone for everything you have done for this community. I mean, I always say that, like, were pivotal to my own recovery, and the content that you have created over the years was absolutely crucial to my own journey. So thank you. It's surreal too to be able to sit with you and have these kinds of conversations on this end of the path. So that's very fun. Thank you for everything you've done, and for
No,
me
it's
and
an
for everybody
honor.
else.
Oh no, it's an honor. Yeah, it's really, I think, special that we get to explore these paths beyond what when we were struggling, what seemed possible. Like
Yeah.
this is so far beyond anything I would have imagined. Like, yeah, I never would have thought of living any other way, let alone then connecting with other people, exploring those skills too. So it's a really special experience for me too. Yeah. So
Same.
thank you. Everybody out there, yeah, feel free to throw any questions if you're watching this video later in the comments down below, or find us online. Kelly, thank you so much. I hope you have a great rest of the weekend, and I hope the garden, as it's getting planted in the spring, is a really fun thing to explore this year too.
Thank you. Always.
All right, thank you. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye,
Thank you,
everyone.
Kelly.
Thanks, Mark.